Good morning, everyone. This is Scott Jorgens from Endeavor Solutions. Thank you very much for joining today's webinar on Journyx for time and expense management. Our agenda is going to be some quick introductions, and then I'll be turning this over to Bryan at Journyx to provide a demonstration of expense management as well as time management. About Endeavor, we've been around for 30 years now. 3 lines of business: advisory services, implementation and upgrades, and ongoing optimization and support. We now have over 600 clients across Canada and parts of the U.S., operating out of our offices in Toronto, Montreal, Halifax, and London, with remote locations in Ottawa and Edmonton. Key line of business is Dynamics GP as well as Dynamics 365 CRM. But we do have gold certifications in Microsoft Cloud and a variety of the other Microsoft Dynamics tool sets. You can visit our team online. We have 2 websites now, one for our core GP, ERP, and cloud consulting, and another for CRM and cloud consulting. And of course, always love to provide a review of the Dynamics GP roadmap. Still continuing to move on strong. We see no signs of anything slowing down. Current version is GP 2018 R2, which was released last fall, and we expect GP Next to be coming out later this year. So I'd like to turn this over to Bryan. I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about Journyx, and we'll get into the demonstration.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Hey, guys. This is Bryan Maxim from Journyx. I'm actually the Director of Sales here. Been at Journyx for a little over 18 years, so a little while. A little bit about the company. We're actually based in Austin, Texas. We've got about 1,200 customers spread out all over the world, as small as 10 to 15 people. Largest customer has about 10,000 folks that use Journyx. In general, we focus on time and expense tracking. That's our core competency. We've been in business for about 22, 23 years now. We do offer Journyx as both a cloud solution, but also you have the ability to put it on-premise. And then from a security and compliance standpoint, a lot of our customers really make sure that we take that very seriously. So we go through a lot of annual audits to make sure that we got all the certifications and compliance to make sure that your data is safe and secure, especially within our cloud environment. So Journyx really is for Dynamics GP. We've been in business for 22 years. For the past 10 years, we've really had a big focus on the GP space. Over those 10 years, we've really have a deep understanding of the business of time and expense tracking specifically for GP. We have a bi-directional off-the-shelf integration between GP and Journyx so that the data flows back and forth pretty easily. And then where we really come into play and provide a lot of value is we really help fill in a lot of the gaps that exist with using some of the native options for tracking time and expense data within GP. We actually did a review with the folks over at MS Dynamics World 4 or 5 years ago, and the top 4 challenges that people reported were, obviously trying to get their time and expense sheets submitted on time. The back office folks especially have a lot of issues with fixing bad data. There's too many corrections that they have to do. The third one is that it doesn't really integrate with all of your other back office systems like GP or maybe a third-party payroll solution like an ADP. And then the last one really is you can't track all of your data in one place. So your project time, your project expenses, your PTO or lieu time, you can't track all that in one location. You have to do multiple applications to be able to track all that data. So where I think Journyx can really help a lot, especially with getting time and expense sheets submitted on time, is first of all, it has to be super easy to use. Nobody likes to track their time and expense data. So the easier we can make this, the more accurate it's going to be, the more timely it's going to get submitted for approval. But if we can provide them with multiple options for entering that data, right? So not only a web interface, but also a very clean, simple mobile app for both iPhones and Android to enter this data. We need to provide a pretty robust approval workflow with email reminders, to both the end user and to managers to really help with that workflow process. And then just providing managers and administrators with what I'll call missing timesheet reports and views so that they can make sure that they've got all their expense and timesheet data submitted on time. When we're talking about integrating with other business solutions, again, we're talking about obviously integrating with GP. That includes being able to integrate with project accounting. Journyx also allows you to integrate with your Microsoft Exchange calendar and task list as sort of like a suggested time entry, which we'll talk a little bit about during the demo. But also integrating with other third-party reporting payroll solutions, including Canadian payroll within GP, ADP, Paychex, or really any of the other sort of big third-party payroll solutions. For those project-oriented companies out there that use Microsoft Project, Journyx gives you the ability to integrate with Microsoft Project as well, but also with a lot of your reporting options like Power BI, BI 360, and Journyx has a pretty robust, well-documented API for being able to push and pull data in and out of the system as well. And then lastly, as I mentioned, being able to track all of your time and expense data in one place. Again, your project time, your project expenses, PTO, leave tracking, being able to do accrual calculations around time off if you're not maintaining that in GP. If you're a field services oriented type organization, having the idea of sort of a crew-based entry where a supervisor can enter time on behalf of their crew is something that we offer. But in addition to that, we allow you to do resource planning and optimization within Journyx and auditing and compliance around data security and compliance around, like I said before, payroll or any other sort of government compliance that you guys might need to have happen. So at this point, I'd like to try to pivot over to actually taking a look at a demonstration of Journyx. Scott has suggested that we take a look at the expense portion first, but then we can also take a look at project time entry, doing leave tracking, leave request, the approval workflow, talk about data entry validation to hopefully reduce the amount of corrections that are needed on the back end, and also some reporting that's available within Journyx. So let me pivot over here to Journyx, and so this is the login screen for Journyx. Note that you can sort of brand the application with your look and feel to sort of build a comfort level within your employee base. Journyx is a web-based application, as I mentioned. You can use any standard web browser. You don't have to use Internet Explorer. And as I also mentioned, we do have a native mobile app for iPhones and Android that would allow you to track your time and expense and do the approval of that time and expense data through a mobile app in addition to the web interface. I'm going to go ahead and log in as sort of an end user, somebody who can enter their expense and time data first. Again, I won't touch on the expense entry first, then we'll pivot over to the time entry. So with Journyx expense entry, it's pretty flexible, pretty customizable in how you guys set this up. But again, because we are integrated fully with GP, all of your projects, sort of your cost categories, your people, all of that will flow over from GP into Journyx, so you don't have to maintain that data in both systems. And so that if I'm tracking my expenses here within Journyx, I could simply pick what project I might be working on. I could pick a number of different expense codes that you guys could customize. Let's say that might be airfare. You can designate whether that might be a company credit card or reimbursable. And then I can enter in the number of dollars that I need to track. Now, Journyx does give you the ability to track expenses in multiple currencies. We can convert that back to whatever native currency you want to convert that back to. So if you have folks that travel, within Canada also, but within the U.S., you can convert that back to Canadian dollars. We also allow you to track different separate line items for your tax breakout, so you guys can break that out for all of the Canadian taxes that you have there. We give you the ability to attach receipt images against your expenses. You can view those receipt images. Those receipt images are stored in the Journyx database. So you can review those receipt images in the approval workflow. You can also review those receipt images in the expense report that you might run within Journyx. We also give you the ability to import credit card files. A lot of your major credit card companies, if you use a sort of a corporate card there, will allow you to download a file that you can actually upload into Journyx with all of your expense transactions. Your employees then can designate which project that might be associated to, and then just upload those expenses onto their expense sheet so that they don't have to enter those expenses sort of one at a time within the application. If somebody is tracking expenses against mileage or kilometers, then we also allow you to have a sort of a mileage or kilometer conversion rate, so that all your employees have to do is enter in the number of kilometers that they travel, and we will convert that back into a dollar transaction for them. Once I enter all of my expenses for that period, I can submit my expense sheet for approval, and that will send that through the appropriate workflow process to my manager to be able to approve my expenses. The time entry process looks exactly like the timesheet process, the expense entry. Same concept, because this is integrated with GP. All of your projects, cost categories, your pay codes, bill codes will all flow in from GP. There's also a comment field that would allow you to enter any sort of comments or notes against the type of work that people might be doing on the project. Each comment entry can have up to 2,000 characters of text, so a couple small sentences worth of data. And those comments can also flow back through to GP if, for example, you need to include those on an invoice back to a customer. The difference here between the expenses and the time, obviously, is I'm just entering in the number of hours that I work on a particular project and cost category. I do also have the ability to track time off here within Journyx. So, for example, if I pick a time off project, you'll notice that it changes my available options in my other drop-down menus so that I can reduce any sort of user error that might occur from tracking leave time. On that note, we do have the ability to calculate and display time off balances directly on the timesheet. That includes also being able to differentiate between the scenario where an employee may take overtime or get comp time as a rule. So Journyx has that level of flexibility around your accrual calculations. We also have a concept of what we call a leave request. And a leave request essentially allows me to request time off in advance. So for example, if I wanted to take Friday off for vacation, I could submit that as a leave request, and that will go through a separate workflow process with email notifications. There's a leave calendar view. And if a manager approves my leave request, it will go ahead and populate that directly onto my timesheet so that I don't have to re-enter that as an end user. That same thing would apply for any company holidays that you might have. So Journyx allows you to also populate your company holidays into the system so that employees don't have to worry about entering in holiday time. Now, there's a couple things around time entry that are pretty cool I wanted to point out to you. A couple of them have to do with the user experience. The first one I mentioned previously in the PowerPoint, and that is our ability to integrate with your Exchange calendar and task list. We call that sort of our suggestion or suggested time entry. And what it's doing, if I click this link, it's actually going to go load all of the entries that I have from my calendar or my task list as suggested time entries. The idea here being that I can fill out my timesheet with the majority of my calendar, the things I'm doing already, and then I can just come in at the end of the week and fill out, sort of fill in the blanks, essentially automating the time entry process for your end users. Now, we're also utilizing artificial intelligence here and machine learning so that as I associate these calendar events against the appropriate project, against the appropriate cost category, it's going to start getting smarter and smarter. So as I go week to week, it's going to start remembering that my meeting invitation is associated with a certain project and cost category, so I don't have to select that over and over again. If I want to cancel out any of those events, or I can cancel out an ongoing recurring meeting, then you can reduce that. But again, it's a pretty cool feature for you folks that are using Exchange that allows me to sort of pre-populate my timesheet with those things I'm already doing on a pretty regular basis. So I just hit my save button and it saved all of those calendar entries to my timesheet. Another feature I wanted to point out that's pretty cool is around the user experience, and it mostly has to do with the scenario where if I work on the same projects on either a pretty regular basis or on a pretty consistent basis for an extended period of time, Journyx gives you the ability to create almost like a set of favorites or like a timesheet template. So for example, if I was to hop out to next week, it's going to carry over those things that I added to my set of favorites. So instead of having to go to the drop-down menu and pick my project and my cost category every time I want to make a time entry, I can just come into my set of favorites here, enter my time against those. And it just saves me a little bit of time and effort as an end user. But again, anytime we can save the end user around time entry is going to be a really good thing. The other feature I wanted to point out is really more around ensuring that your employees are entering in good data into the system and hopefully reducing the amount of corrections that you guys have to do on the back end. So Journyx has a data validation entry rules engine that's pretty flexible around some of the rules you guys can build to make sure that the data that's being entered into the system is accurate. Now, in addition to that, we can limit the projects people have access to on their timesheet. Again, we can build relationships between the project and cost category columns so that when I pick a specific project, I only see certain cost categories, so that helps reduce any data errors. But I also built an example rule here that says if I tried to enter in more than 50 hours in a time period, that it's going to give me a notification message that tells me I can't enter more than 50 hours in a week. Now, this is just an example. You could build rules around minimum hours, maximum hours per day, per week. A good rule might be if somebody is approaching overtime and you want them to be aware of that. This data validation entry rules engine really just helps ensure, hopefully, that the data that's being entered into the system is as accurate as possible, and again, thereby reducing the amount of corrections that you guys have to do on the back end. So I will reduce that down to below 50, allow me to submit my timesheet for approval. Then the other thing I wanted to note is that there are several email notifications that you guys could choose to turn on that can do anything from reminding people to do their timesheets on time, let them know if they're late doing their timesheets. You can let managers know if their employees are late doing their timesheets. There's also emails around submission, approval, or rejection of both the time and expense sheet. And those emails are customizable. You can change the title and body of those emails and also the timing on when those are generated from the system. Again, you have the option to enter this data through a mobile app for iPhone and Android. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and log out as this end user. And I'm actually going to go ahead and log in as an admin and take a look at things like the approval workflow process and some reporting that's available within Journyx. So again, keeping with that workflow, I could, as a manager, receive an email notification that lets me know that somebody has submitted my timesheet for approval. There is an approval queue here within Journyx. There's some flexibility around the approval workflow, so you can approve data at both a sheet level. You can also approve data at a project level. So the sheet level is going to be more like, let's say that Scott is my boss. So he's going to approve my entire time or expense sheet, regardless of the projects that I work on for that period. The time sheet-based approval is going to be more this time approvals, where you can see that I've got 3 timesheets waiting my approval. So I'll click the 3 timesheets there. The first screen that I come to is more of a summary type screen. So I can see the employee's name, I can see the time period, and I can see the hours that have been worked. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and check some of these and go ahead and approve or reject the timesheet from this screen. I can also click the period link, which is going to open up a second window with all of the detail of the timesheet. I could go ahead and approve or reject the timesheet from this screen. If I'm going to reject the timesheet, I can put a reason for rejection in this white box below, and we can send that reason for rejection back to the employee. We can also display that across the top of their expense sheet, their timesheet as a notification message, so that they can know what corrections they need to make before they resubmit that for approval. Now, if I have the appropriate authority level within Journyx, I can also reopen this timesheet and make changes to the time or expense sheet on behalf of the user. If I do that, each sheet that I have has sort of an individual sheet history or audit trail that will tell you who did when, what, and where, so that if there's any sort of disputes around the timesheet process, it would tell you that an admin opened that timesheet or expense sheet as opposed to rejecting that back to the end user. Any of these approval workflows can have multiple levels of approval. So in my scenario, again, if Scott was my approver, he's my manager, he approves my time or expense sheet, it could then go up to, for example, like an administrator or somebody in the back office to approve that time or expense sheet at a second level. In addition to having multiple levels, you can also have a primary and alternate approver at each level. So if Scott was out sick or on vacation, my time or expense sheet could be routed to his alternate approver so that my sheet doesn't get stuck in that workflow process. The expense sheet looks very similar. You can see I've got 1 expense sheet waiting my approval. Same concept here, that I could check this, I could approve it or reject it from this summary screen, or click the period link that gives me more detail. If I've got a yellow sort of caret icon here, that lets me know that there's a receipt image to view there. So I can go in and review the receipt images. Again, I could also see those receipt images in an expense report that you can run directly out of Journyx. The project-based approvals are more project-oriented. So if I am a project manager, let's say for project 1, then somebody submits time and expense data, I would only see the time and expense data that anybody in the organization worked on my specific project. And then I could go and approve or reject the time or expense data entered against my project, as opposed to approving that at the sheet level. The other thing I wanted to point out around the approval workflow for you guys is what we call organization compliance. And by compliance, what we really mean is that people are submitting and approving their timesheets on time. So this is one nice view that we have, that basically these 4 people submit their timesheets to this manager. And so what I like about this view is you can see the status of everybody's time or expense sheet, but I can also take action on this. So if I wanted to send an email to Brian, to Scott is my manager, to both of them, I could also open this in a timekeeping mode. So Journyx has sort of a feature that we call timekeeping, which is sort of like a proxy entry. So somebody can enter time or expense data on behalf of another employee. That includes being able to do that crew-based entry. So a supervisor could enter time or expense data for a crew of people, all from one entry screen, as opposed to entering in 1 sheet at a time. You can click this Run Approval Emails Now button. Anytime you click that button, it's going to generate an additional notification email to the employee to remind them to submit their time or expense sheet on time. We have this same view in a report type format as well. So we've got sort of a missing timesheet report that you can run that would basically tell you the status of everybody's timesheet and the amount of hours that they've entered. From a reporting standpoint, Journyx does have its own reporting engine built into it. Though, as I mentioned before, it's very common for Journyx customers to use other third-party reporting solutions like a Power BI or BI 360. Our API allows us to connect to that. We also have some out-of-the-box data feeds directly from Journyx for Power BI that allow you to utilize that solution to do some additional analytics. If we're talking about just using sort of standard Journyx reporting, there are about 8 standard report templates that you guys can modify to sort of get you started. But you do have the ability to create an unlimited number of additional reports in the system. I built a very simple sort of project summary report to take a look at. If I go ahead and run that report, this is just an example report that happens to be subtotaling this data by project and then by person within that project. And then I'm just listing out the project, the cost category, the person, and the hours that they worked for that particular time period. But you can modify any of these standard reports. From this modification screen, it's pretty easy to pick and choose what you want to report on. That includes being able to change any of your date ranges. You can use this filter section to pick and choose specific projects, cost categories, pay codes, bill codes, or people that you might want to report on. You can use this report output options to pick and choose how that gets displayed on the screen. So for example, instead of by project and user, maybe I want to see that by project and cost category. So I'll make that change, save and run that same exact report, and now you can see this is subtotal by project and then by cost category within that. All of our reports have a one-click export to Excel. So if I click that button, it's going to go ahead and launch Excel for me and put this into an Excel type format. So if you wanted to sort of further manipulate the data in Excel, you could. And then because we have so many customers that do like to use Excel for reporting, many years ago, we built an Excel plugin that we call ReportLink. Once you install ReportLink on your desktop, it's just going to create a Journyx tab within your Excel interface. And essentially what you'll do is you'll plug in the URL for Journyx. You'll use your login and password for Journyx because it's still going to respect your permission levels within the application. I can enter in a date range for the time or expense records that I'm looking for. And when I click the refresh button and put in my password, what it's going to do is it's going to go out to the Journyx database, and in this particular instance, pull in all the time records that fall into the date range that I designated here. And if you guys are familiar with doing Excel-based reporting, as an example, I could insert, let's say, a pivot table. Because this is now directly connected to the Journyx database, all of the fields in my field list are going to be all the fields from Journyx. So I can pull in my people, let's say if I want to pull in my project or job name, and I'll just pull a real simple one and pull in my hours. The idea behind this reporting feature, though, is you could build out the 2 or 3 reports that you use on a pretty regular basis as Excel templates. And to update all of those reports at one time, I can just come over to this Journyx tab, this report link feature, update my date range, and click the refresh button. And it's going to update all of my reports at the same time, because what it's really doing is updating the underlying data source for all of those reports. The one other thing I wanted to mention about reporting is within Journyx, we have this concept of what we call custom fields. So I'm actually going to go in and just modify a user card or user profile within the application. And down here at the bottom is this concept of these custom fields. Now, the list of custom fields that you see here are just some of the default custom fields for a user. But you guys can identify and create an unlimited number of additional custom fields. And these custom fields could be by person, by project, by cost category, pay code, or bill code. You could also have custom fields for any of your expense attributes. And really, that's what they're really meant for. They're attributes of those data objects that you might want to include in reporting. So if you wanted to report on somebody's location or supervisor or what department they belong to, you have that flexibility to be able to create those custom fields within Journyx and display any of those in any report that you might use directly out of the application. We also use these custom fields for mapping data between your other business systems, like whether it be GP or a third-party reporting tool like ADP. We use those custom fields for mapping data from Journyx to those other business systems. I mentioned before that we've got a data entry validation tool that allows you to build, let's say, basic rules, which might be, minimums or maximum number of hours per day, per week, per period. There's also rules around expenses. So if you want to set caps on, for example, per diems that your employees might have, you can set that business rule. We also have business rules around blocking. So if you want to prevent people from entering in work time on a holiday or tracking time in advance for compliance purposes. We also have rules around rounding rules. So if you have an instance where you need to enter in and out times for your time entry, then we can round rules to the next quarter hour, half hour, things like that. From a data accuracy standpoint, I also mentioned that Journyx has the ability to do overtime calculations. So there is a feature here that we call a payroll rules engine. Essentially what you can do is create as many pay groups as you might have. So it might be a mix of exempt, non-exempt. You might have people in the US, for example, that have California overtime rules. So you've got different pay groups. And within these different pay groups, you guys can identify different overtime rules that apply to that pay group so that all the employee needs to do is worry about entering in the hours that they worked, and Journyx will take care of all of the overtime calculations for you. And then there is a number of different payroll solutions that we integrate with, including some of the main ones, ADP, Paychex, GP Canadian Payroll we support, which I know many don't. So we have a lot of flexibility there. So from a demonstration standpoint for Journyx, really the main things I wanted to cover with you guys here today was our ability to enter in expenses and time through both the web interface but also through the mobile app. But also wanted to make sure that we fill in a lot of the gaps that the native GP options can't offer. So whether it be from doing the integration with Exchange for your suggested time entries, your ability to create a timesheet template or set of favorites, your data validation entry rules for making sure the data gets entered as correctly as possible. You also have sort of any rules around expense entry, around per diems, the auto calculation of kilometers or mileage based on conversion rates, currency conversions, receipt image attachment through the web and mobile app. But I also wanted to talk to you guys about the approval workflow, having the ability to do that by sheet or by project. Also the ability to have multiple levels of approval and primary and alternate approvers. I also wanted to talk to you guys about the concept of a crew-based entry or proxy entry, so somebody can enter time on behalf of other people, but also a lot of flexibility that we have around reporting, integrating with Excel, Power BI, BI 360, and also just the idea that Journyx has a pretty well documented and robust API that you guys could use for integrating with other business systems as well.
So as next steps, reached out to Trish Fortin for current clients. She's our client relationship manager and can set up times for additional discussions, services, quotes, etc. And for those that are new to Endeavor, you can reach out to Steve Ewing, and him and his team can help you get to know Endeavor and consider us for helping with GP, CRM, Cloud, and Journyx.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And on that note, too, guys, if anybody wants to set up some time to have a more sort of private demonstration based on your specific requirements, I'm happy to coordinate that through Trish or Steve or Scott or anybody there on the Endeavor team to get that done for you.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.